Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. This month at the Trust has been an exciting one. We've brought together our teams, starting with our board and working all the way down from our C-suite down to our site staff and reinvigorating everyone to come together to refocus on our mission, and that's our residents. Putting our residents first and making sure that we're addressing their needs and focusing on that as a team, all united as one. Today, I'm excited to bring Nadia is going to be moderating our discussion this afternoon and conversation. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to her.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our discussion today. I'm Chief Financial Officer for Skid Row Housing Trust. I'm very excited to introduce our four panelist partners and have an interesting discussion. We have a very various subjects to talk about, but they bring lots of experience, so let's get started. First is Michael Shillstone. Michael is the Director of Economic Development for Central City Association, and he manages CCA's advocacy on economic development, housing, and land use policies and issues, and aims to foster economic development capacity through coordination with the city, county, and elected officials, business improvement districts, known as BID, and the business community. Prior to joining CCA, Michael worked as a real estate and economic development consultant for HR&A advisors, where he focused on a broad range of initiatives at the intersection of the public and private sectors. He also previously served as the press officer of the New York City Department of City Planning. Michael received a Bachelor of Arts in Philosophy from Manhattan College and a Master of Urban Planning with concentration in Economic Development from the University of Southern California. Hi, Michael, and welcome. Matthew Barron is the CEO of Barron Property Group since 2005. Matthew has acquired and developed over $1.5 billion worth of property in New York and Los Angeles. He currently sits on the board of directors of the Long Island City BID and is also a member of the board of directors of Dorky, which is a company he helped found. Matthew was also an adjunct lecturer at New York University's School of Continuing and Professional Studies, where he taught a course of real estate development. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Finance from NYU Stern and an MBA from Columbia Business School. Hi, Matt, and welcome. Christian Ahumada was born in Chile, and he came to the US in the late 1970s. His passion lies in the evolution of cities, community building, integration of individuals of all socioeconomic strata, sustainability, environmental resiliency, and ending homelessness. Christian's primary goal today is to advance new, faster, and more economic models of housing that do not rely on the utilization of low-income housing tax credits, or known as LIHTC. Over the last 20 years, he has overseen the development of more than 1,200 affordable apartment units, primarily apartments with supportive services for people who have experienced homelessness and households with special needs. He has secured over $400 million in loans, grants, and equity from both private and public sources. During his time at CBH, Christian has successfully transitioned the organization from the parent company, Mental Health America of Los Angeles, into an independent and strong housing developer, diversified the organization's income stream, and created a new non-LIHTC department to bifurcate housing production. Christian brings a unique approach of creating homes, not units, creating communities and not projects. He received a Bachelor of Science in Urban and Regional Planning from the California State Polytechnic University, Pomona, during the inaugural year of the discipline. He loves to spend time with his son, Diego, train Taekwondo, play chess, garden, barbecue, and look for UFOs. Very cool. Welcome, Christian. And last but not least, Con Hao is a managing director of City Views Los Angeles Fund. which has built or renovated 21 projects with over 2,500 units in Los Angeles County. CityView is an institutional housing investment firm active throughout California and Southwest. Prior to joining CityView, Khan was Director of Planning for the City of Los Angeles for 13 years, responsible for the Adaptive Reuse Ordinance, the Downtown Housing Incentive Ordinance, and zoning codes that incentivize mixed-use, infill, small lot, and affordable housing. Previously, he was Executive Director of the New York City Planning Department, working extensively on Times Square and Lower Manhattan. He holds degrees from MIT and Yale University and taught a course in planning and redevelopment at USC. He serves on the board of Path Ventures, a nonprofit which builds permanent supportive housing throughout California. Welcome, Khan, and welcome everyone. And we're excited to ask you some questions. We'll get started with Michael. Hi, Michael, first and foremost. Hope you're having a good day. Hi, thank you for joining us.
Thanks,
Michael, question for you. So as Director of Economic Development, you're working to drive the conversation around comprehensive solutions to homelessness with a goal of making LA a city that accommodates housing on all income levels. Everyone agrees that housing needs to be built at scale, and some see increased funding as the sole solution. According to your research, what would be a more holistic approach to that?
Yeah, I think in terms of kind of all housing, I think the key sort of thing that we need to address first and foremost is zoning. So currently only 17% of the city of LA's land is zoned for high density multifamily housing. And then talking about 100% affordable housing specifically, not the broader realm of housing. I think a more holistic approach really needs to be critical of kind of the underlying issues that have fostered kind of smaller, more moderate scale affordable housing and have produced a pretty slow rate of affordable housing production as well. So I think there is a lot of focus on the funding side, and I think somewhat fairly so. The mayor in an article recently talked about how he would encourage his successor to double down or triple down on the funding that was generated by HHH just a few years ago, which was about $1.2 billion and was spent over a handful of years. I think there's certainly a need for more affordable housing funding. I would say probably in a more targeted manner, like the old community redevelopment agencies. And that I think it would be foolish for us as a city, a region, and a state to kind of just keep throwing money at the issue without addressing some of the underlying structural issues that are kind of prohibiting us from producing affordable housing at the rate that we need to be and at the scale that we need to be to really address the magnitude of the crisis. So we've done some kind of back of the envelope math looking at the real need, which is surprisingly, it's not something that's really out there front and center about what do we need to be actually building every single year to meet our need and our projected need. Looking at the recent regional housing needs allocation and looking specifically for lower income households over the next 8 years. Right now, at the rate that we're building, we build about 68 units per project, and we average about 31 projects per year in terms of 100% affordable housing. If we're to continue to build at that rate, we need about 140, probably at least 140 more 100% affordable projects per year in order to hit that mark, which is pretty unfathomable at, right now we average about 30 projects per year. In the past 3 years, we've done a bit better, about 50 to 60 projects per year, but still need to go kind of double the rate of that. So what we've been looking at is, instead of kind of sourcing, trying to find 140 more sites per year, structure 140 more deals per year, get 140 more construction crews per year, building bigger projects, essentially, getting more units out of every individual of hundreds in the city. There are a lot of structures in place that can incentivize this more moderate scale. Combination of factors from at the local level, the city's discretionary review thresholds, which basically sort of punish or discourage projects over a certain size. For permanent supportive housing projects is a 150 unit cap, but make them go through a more onerous process by virtue of just having more units. At the state level, through the LIHTC program and actually through a number of other public funding programs, but LIHTC arguably being the kind of most heavily used and most important, caps on loan amounts, nominal caps on developer fees, ultimately kind of incentivize providing the least number of units to get the most amount of developer fee that you can, rather than projects that produce the highest volume of units. So trying to look at to see how they can be tweaked to instead reward larger projects that build affordable housing more efficiently. So I think ultimately those that's the realm of a more holistic approach. And then the other side too is kind of decreasing our dependency on public funding to build rent-restricted affordable housing and looking at how we can better use and better encourage private capital to build 100% affordable housing too.
Well, thank you for that. And, definitely the numbers are staggering. And, thank you for looking at better ways to provide affordable housing. We definitely understand. And so thank you for that. So question is for you. So as developer of Cecil Hotel, able to publicly funded projects, can you share the challenges and benefits of privately funded projects to support affordable housing?
Sure. So first off, thanks for having me on. So yeah, the Cecil Hotel is a 600 unit, 100% affordable project, fully privately financed. We have no public subsidies on the building at all. I think let's start with maybe the benefits, and then we can go to some of the challenges. I mean, obviously, I think some of the benefits, frankly, are that just, we didn't have to deal with a lot of the bureaucracy and a lot of the red tape, frankly, that most affordable projects have to deal with. And so in terms of speed to market and speed to execution, we started leasing this building up, I guess, December of last year, and we actually started the project. So, start to lease up. The project's not finished. We'll be finished in about a month or so, but start, from the start of the project to lease up was right around 18 months, or maybe just under 18 months. So in terms of speed, in terms of getting a project, making the decision to move forward and actually opening your doors, I think that's probably unmatched in the public world. And just, the minimization of red tape that we had to deal with was definitely a benefit. A lot of the challenges, frankly, relate to, I think, how the project is received, both on the public and the private side. I think when we made the decision to do this, and I think this is my understanding, is this is the first project like this in Los Angeles. It was Sierra actually that came up with the idea. This was a project that actually COVID, and Sierra came to say, maybe we could figure out a way to do it 100. We kind of said to ourselves, oh my God, like everybody's gonna roll out the red carpet, and it's gonna be just a lot of these things happen. And I think one of the things that we were shocked about, some of the challenges were certainly from the city side. We were a little bit shocked at how, it definitely did go after chasing it a bit. I mean, we definitely got a lot of support from like the state assembly member's office, the local city council person. These guys really stepped up when we needed them to, but certainly it was a bit of a slog frankly, to get there on some of the things that we needed to get done. So I think I would say that was a bit of a shock, that there wasn't really like a sort of welcoming, sort of, this is privately financed, it's 600 units, like, come on in, we're going to like throw open all the doors for you and give you whatever you need to make it happen. It certainly was not that, and I kind of wish it was. And also just on the private side, I think educating capital about what this could be, because there was really nothing to point to, so for lenders and investors, because, like, in the development business, as most people know, most developers, 95% of developers take outside capital. You take investment, investor dollars. So I think just educating investors on what the potential here could be, and also educating lenders, was really challenging, because there was nothing else to point to. There was no other competitive project that we could point to and say, hey, this has been done 10 times over. Here's how it worked the last 10 times. No, we kind of, we're to a certain degree making this up as we were going along. So that certainly was a challenge in terms of, in terms of sourcing capital and sort of keeping everybody, happy, to use one expression.
Yeah, and it definitely, sometimes it's called, innovative solutions to problems, and, and experienced lenders and agencies are scared sometimes of innovation. So
Yeah.
I think, where you're
They don't
bringing
get
to the
paid.
table is
They don't get paid enough. I mean, lenders especially,
Yeah.
they don't get paid enough to take innovation risk, right?
Yeah.
I mean, investors theoretically do, but still they can just be gun. But I think what's really missing, because it's clear to me, most of the stuff we do is in New York, and I think LA, from an affordability and sort of, housing market perspective, are very, very similar. New York is also very tight housing market, very expensive housing market. Affordability is a real issue. Homelessness is a real issue here. So they're very, very similar. So it's kind of, same movie, different actors for us when we came, sort of across the country here. And what really sort of shocks me is that I feel like there's really sort of not a full appreciation, at the city level, for how projects like this can help alleviate the rent burden, not just at the bottom, not just for homelessness. I mean, affordability is really an issue kind of across the entire strata, right? Because if a middle class family is priced out of an apartment unit and they've got go into a lower priced unit, that they're pricing somebody else out of that unit, right? And it sort of goes down the chain, and sort of low man or woman on the totem pole is going to get knocked out and end up homeless, right? And that's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy in and of itself. And really the answer to that, it's kind of first week economics 101, it's supply. You create more supply, you're going to alleviate the problem, irrespective of where you're creating it in the strata, right? So that, to me, if there's an opportunity for private capital to come in that costs the city and state nothing, frankly, maybe some time to sort of craft some pathways and some rules to help guys like me figure it out a little bit easier. But otherwise, it feels like there's a huge missed opportunity here, because I know there's a lot of people. I mean, for us, when this project is done, we're going to be looking for a part 2, because this is going to be successful for us. But I feel like there would literally be a line of people like us willing to do privately financed affordable deals if there was sort of even a general framework or a pathway that they could follow.
Yeah. Well, hopefully now they have an example, and there's an example of how you did it. So hopefully, you can share this experience with others in the future. So
Looking forward to it.
Thank you, Matt. Christian, question for you. And, welcome to the discussion. Your unique approach has helped Clifford Beers Housing transition into a strong and independent developer of affordable housing. So what do you see as the ideal economic model for developing housing without relying on low-income housing tax credits and avoiding restrictions that come along with it, similar to how the other panelists have mentioned, but really want to see what your take is on that.
Yeah, thank you for having me. the majority, if not all, production associated with permanent supportive housing and affordable housing, at least here in Los Angeles, is associated with low-income housing tax credits, right? They're financed either with a 9 or the 4% tax credit. And so when you try to create a tool that deviates from that, what you find out is that you have that life-eccentric industry that only incentivizes that structure, right? So you have to sort of figure out, okay, how do I do that, right? So you can either say, I gotta go find the money somewhere else, or you could attempt to decrease costs. And what we're trying to do is actually do both. Right. So for instance, you say, well, okay, let's take the 4% tax credit that brings in about 35% tax
Kristen,
credit.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. I think there's a lot of feedback that people are hearing on your end. I'm not sure if maybe there's
Let me see if I remove this, if it helps. Okay, hold on. Does that help?
Still a little bit the same, yeah.
Does this help?
We can hear you a little better, but there's some background noise, like there's a fax machine printing. Oh, that's what I'm hearing.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Can we do the following? Can you give me a second to maybe to move into another office, and then while you take the next person?
Okay, yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
Thank you. While Christian is fixing his technical issues, Con, I'd like to ask you a question. So for Los Angeles, zoning has not been up, no, and only 17% of the city is zoned for the type of density that could support mixed income and affordable housing. And with your experience in city planning, both in New York and Los Angeles, what do you think needs to happen in urban planning offices to address affordability and equity in housing?
Okay, hopefully there's no feedback on mine.
You sound great.
Okay. Well, let me pick up on some things that both Michael and Matthew pointed out, but let me start by saying I think the fundamental problem in providing affordable housing at scale is the cost of new construction. It is just high, and it is continuing to get higher. And if you break down the components of the costs for new construction, you realize there's only a few that can actually be affected by either public policy or other actions. So, I mean, just to quickly go through them, we'll start with profit. Most affordable housing is still being built by nonprofit affordable housing developers, and I can assure you from my work with PATH, and I can assure you with your work with Skid Row Housing Trust, that it's not because they're making a lot of money. It's developers' fees that keeps the overhead, but it's not a quick way to get wealthy. But so it's not profits. In terms of materials, people selling drywall or lumber or concrete couldn't care less whether you're building for affordable housing or for the very rich or for an office building. So you get absolutely no break on all the materials. In terms of labor, you actually not only not get a break, you pay more because of the requirement, if you're using public funds, of prevailing wage, which is going to increase labor costs 20 to 30%. And in terms of land, again, property owners, they want to sell for the highest price they can get. So you typically don't get help on that, which leads me, to the points that both Michael and Matthew made. What are the other components? One is the discretionary actions and timing of approval by cities. And if that is slow and discretionary and opens you up to lawsuits through CEQA, it's going to add costs that are beyond, above and beyond what you can do. If you, in terms, and I think this was Matthew's point, the capital financing stack, every time you layer on affordable housing or permanent supportive housing another funding source, there's a different set of closing documents and lawyers and regulations, all of which are actually understandable, but you're mixing together all these different layers. So that adds costs. So what do we do about it? The ones we can affect are, first of all, the discretionary actions in city government. And so I think, we could have a whole discussion about that, but making things more by right, avoiding CEQA, which you can, anyone building housing knows the immediate impact legislation exempted certain projects from CEQA review and made them ministerial. That was, I can give specific examples of how that helped. To the extent that the city zones land better and for more units, that helps. And in terms of land costs, which I think a couple people's point, if either get a land write-down, which is what he's used to do, but then they've been gone for. You can give government or institutional land, school district land, university land, other city land at a discounted price or for free. You really can impact a major part of the cost structure. And I would just have you look at the today's editorial in the LA Times, which talked about promoting the use of government land and university owned land to help on the land costs of affordable housing. So that would be my sense, is that you have to keep working on the discretionary public policy and action, including putting proper limits on CEQA and the litigation and delays that hinders, and then deal with work on the land costs.
Yeah, I think it's so good to hear that, and kind of all of our panelists' thoughts coming together, because it all sounds like once we remove the roadblocks for developers to come up with innovative solutions, I mean, it all has to come together, right? It can't be, it's not going to be one company, one developer that can solve this huge problem. It has to go on every level, starting with developers, with city, state, and federal government that will allow to build more effectively. So
if I could just make one other point, because it made me think of Matthew's project. I'm assuming that he was able to bring in those 600 units at a per unit cost much below brand new construction, and that was in effect one of the aspects of that was it should have been covered by the adaptive reuse ordinance, which made it by right. And I don't know, maybe there were other things that added costs, but that's just an example. Not only is can rehabilitation or adaptive reuse be cheaper? Not always, but can. But the city at least got out of the way of that basically 20 years ago with the adoption of the adaptive reuse ordinance.
And with that question, actually, maybe Matt, we can go to you, and just so you can somewhat answer that question.
Yeah.
I'd
love to. Yeah. We, what definitely, Kona's right. I mean, having an existing building and doing an adaptive reuse project for us, it did save a lot of It did save a significant amount of cost. It also saved a significant amount of time. I mean, building a new building does sometimes, not always, take longer than adaptive reuse in a building. But the other thing that we were able to do, and I think Cone touched on this earlier, one of the things cities can do is, zoning can really, and density can really help affordability because of land prices. Land prices, again, just like New York, land prices are silly. Affordable housing deals don't really make sense with market rate land prices. So what can you do? Well, one simple answer would be, if you're going to be doing an affordable project, there should be some way to get some type of additional density to basically negate that significant land cost. And it should be limited just to affordable housing, because if it's just across the board, well, it's not really going to change anything. You're just going to have bigger buildings, and all the land costs are just going to be, still stay sky high. For us, in addition to the adaptive reuse, we had a lot of density in that building that was grandfathered in. So we had unit sizes that were, today are non-conforming. So it was the combination of the density, the speed, and the cost. Those three things put together really allowed this project financially to work. But I just think that, and I think that this project can be replicated irrespective of help from the city. I think you can probably find similar type deals like this and make them work. But I also think it provides a really nice roadmap of what you need in order to help proliferate this type of development. It's really a function of, keeping those per unit costs down. I mean, if I tell you what our per unit costs are in relation to regular affordable, I mean, it's embarrassing. I think we are at, I think we're right around $130,000 per unit, all in, right? So when you compare that, yeah,
embarrassing that.
yeah. Well, I didn't actually mean for us. I meant that's not what I meant. But I think it provides a bit of a roadmap to say, like, look, density helped that. The adaptive reuse part of it helped that, and also just speed to market. If this would have taken me an extra 2 years to get my zoning, my carry costs would have been an extra, maybe 50 or 60,000 a unit alone, right? So all these things really, really do matter, and sort of when you put them together in the bucket.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, Matt, and agreed. Hopefully we can, replicate what you've been doing and bring some additional affordable housing in LA and all across the nation. I'm going to go back to Christian. Christian, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Is this better?
There you go. Yes.
All right.
Matt is saying yes. So, if you just want to continue into, the same discussion, and just let us know what your thoughts are around, working with private capital and developing without tax credits.
Yes. So what we unraveled was this. We said, okay, if you take, for instance, the 4% tax credit, and you think of the 4% tax credit as 35% tax credit equity into a transaction, how can we replace that, or how can we get rid of that as a cost? And we ended up doing a little bit of both. So we said, and this is to Khan's point, what if we competitively went after requests for proposal sites from the city, or from Surplus Land Act, or work with, let's say, churches to secure those pieces of land? What is that worth in terms of the percentage of TDC in that capital? That amounts probably somewhere between 10 and 15% of TDC. And then we said, well, what if we sited next to TOCs and therefore got rid of the concrete podium, which holds the parking, right? Which is actually somewhere today around 15% of TDC, if you guys can believe that, because of the price of concrete and steel. Not to mention the fact that it actually ends up with a better project, and it's a greater benefit to the environment, because concrete and steel are just gigantic contributor of emissions. So now if you take, let's say, 10% of that 15%, you're at 25%, maybe a little bit more, right? And we said, okay, what if we took a look at something like a prefab typology that can help us go fast? proven that it can be cheaper, but we know it can go faster, right? In prefab, what if instead of just units, but the units came with the corridors and the catwalks, right? And what if the units themselves already had the elevator shaft in it? What if the emergency stairs were already in it? So by the time you finish stacking, you're essentially done, right? And then we figured out that, heck, we're pretty close to that 35%, right? And then we started thinking a different way, which is, you know, how can we find cheap, long-term financing? And then you end up on an FHA product that is, you know, the underwriting takes about a year. It's a little treacherous, but you end up with just this phenomenal rate, you know, that you can go out to 40 years. You're essentially there. And then you start tweaking with other things. So for instance, if you start tweaking with an integrated population mix, that now think of it as maybe 35 to 50% PSH and maybe an affordable component and potentially even a missing middle, right? You could end up with a project that now cross-subsidizes some of those higher AMI units with the deeper affordability targets. And there you start removing some of the dependence on Section 8 typically associated with PSH. So essentially, we've created a model, and I don't want to preach gospel here, you know, of a path. What Matthew, you know, for doing what he did, and I understand that that could also be potentially, but rightfully so, it's still like awesome that we got somebody else that's actually producing affordability through a new tool. So I think we're at a crossroads today where we should think of LIHTC as a tool, right? It's a tool, and is it cost and time efficient? Absolutely not, but it's a tool that works, but we need to add new tools to that tool belt, right? To be able to take bigger bites. Use as much as you need, right? Our end, and there's a couple of other little moves here that we do. Those are the big ticket items.
Thanks, Christian. If you can answer, if you can share what you believe is the highest impact action that's needed to produce affordable housing at scale. Maybe pick one, you know, most impactful. Con, why don't we start with you, and then everybody else can answer that question.
Well, as I said, I think there's a continuous work that should be done in terms of public policy. But related to that, I think that the dollar for dollar savings of affecting the land cost and Christian, I think, mentioned institutional loan. That one component, because you know, private developers are now paying as much per unit for the land cost as Matthew paid for a whole unit to be delivered. So, and I'm not at all discounting all the work that ought to be done in terms of public policy, but still the dollar for dollar savings would be in reducing the land cost.
So land cost. Michael, how about you?
Yeah, it's hard to pick one, but I'd say the kind of biggest impact one that I could think of would be a broad-based upzoning. To allow much more housing capacity across not just the city of LA and its kind of funky jurisdictional boundaries, but across the entire region, across the entire state. I mean, just thinking of a place like Santa Monica. In downtown Santa Monica, I think you're limited to 8 stories maximum if you're building a new. Santa Monica had more permissive zoning, it would probably look more like Rio de Janeiro than, you know, a quaint little 7-story city that it is now. But, you know, places that are job rich, transit rich, like Santa Monica, like Pasadena, and also are just really high demand, highly desirable places, they need to step up and provide much more capacity, which would ease housing pressure, you know, both for capital A affordable housing and lowercase a affordable housing across the entire region.
Okay. Matthew.
Yeah, I'm going to agree sort of with at the city level. I think, look, I build a lot of market rate too, so I'll just be very, very blunt. I think blanket density can be very problematic and can just be very challenging to institute, especially in places like Santa Monica, where I'm sure there's a lot of people that are, you know, there's probably a tremendous amount of NIMBY there. But I think it's very hard to argue where the density trade is tied to some level of affordability. So I think when you're doing that, when you're doing a density trade that is related to AMI levels and things like that, you know, it takes a little bit of the teeth out of some of those arguments. And what it'll also do is, you know, the problem is when you have blanket density, because I've been involved in a lot of those rezonings in New York, all it really does is it takes the land, you could build a lot more density, but it doesn't really help you on land prices much, because land prices just adjust on that density. So it's still, it won't really tackle the issue of spending, I don't know what it is today, 600,000, 700,000, 800,000 a unit of, you know, to build a unit of affordable housing. But if you sort of tie the density to, you know, where you get X for market, but you get X plus Y for, you know, for affordable, and maybe X plus YZ for this AMI, you know, I think that now starts to not translate into a higher land price, but will give you the ability to take your per unit costs down. And who knows, maybe you won't even need as much subsidy.
Mm-hmm. True. And last but not least, Christian.
I'm gonna jump on the density bandwagon here because I think that's right on. I'm gonna jump on it with a little tiny story. So pre-pandemic, I had a friend that was coming over my house, and we were gonna go somewhere. I don't remember what. And by my house, there's a very big lot that used to have a little tiny house that got damaged by the earthquake a million years ago. And they demoed the house, and that piece of land stood there for a very long time. And when we're driving, we passed by that big lot, and my friend says to me, hey, what are they going to build there? And I said, hey, I got one of those little 300-foot, you know, notices, and they're going to put 5 houses there. And you know what he says to me? He says, you should oppose it. And I said, why? Now, why would I do that? Knowing, you know what I do. Why would I do that, right? I think that mentality is exactly the problem, right? We want to complain about, you know, solve the problem, solve the housing crisis, solve, you know, the homeless crisis, but that has to go somewhere, right? And as Michael alluded to, right, if you start tearing apart the city and figuring out where you can build, there's only a handful of places that you can actually really go up, which is a whole set of other issues that we can certainly talk about. So I think what we need to do is there needs to be education, particularly for the voters, right? For folks to say, hey, this is where I think it should go. Let's attach it to TOCs, right? Let's make it a quarter mile, because you can get other bennies, and you're mobilizing a lot of folks, right? And we can figure out where it goes, if it's Santa Monica but you know, like I live in the San Fernando Valley, and the San Fernando Valley has very few buildings that go up more than 5 or 6 stories. You know, San Gabriel Valley, same thing. So I think we need to create some sort of education that goes out to folks. And I think that if we really are serious about solving this, individuals are going to have to get comfortable that it's got to go somewhere.
Right. Very true. Thank you so much to the four of you for joining us. Definitely would love to talk more about all of this. But, you know, we got to move on to the next conversation, and have a wonderful rest of your week. And I'm going to turn it over to Jet.
Hi, everybody. Wow, that was such a great conversation. Nadia, you did a beautiful job moderating. And Christian, it's really fun to have you here. Michael, we appreciate all the work that you've done to lead this research. Matt, we remain your huge fans and are so grateful for all the work you've done to help our community welcome private capital. And Con, it's wonderful to have you and your expertise here also. We are super excited about our spring campaign. We're going to be working to revitalize all 15 of our community gardens so that our residents can experience the benefits of gardening for their mental, physical, and social health. There are opportunities to donate, sponsor, volunteer, celebrate. Spoiler alert, Christian, you're going to be invited to help us at the Cobb. And Matt, you know, there's always room for you too. But I don't want to take any time away from our last guest. Our friend Chris Bowen is here from the Southern California Association of Nonprofit Housing to discuss a truly significant ballot measure to increase funding for affordable housing in the region. And he's a fast talker, but we have not left him with much time. So I'm going to turn it over to Chris.
Thank you so much, Jet. Chris Bowen here with SCAMP, and I'm going to do my best to really get through this quite quickly. So the real point of this discussion right now is to let you all know that we are gathering signatures for this ballot initiative, and we need to collect 65,000 valid signatures to get this on the ballot in November. But those signatures are due at the end of April. And so we are working quite feverishly to collect those signatures. And we would really appreciate your help. We have quite a few different groups helping us collect those signatures. So none of these items that I'm about to discuss will be able to come to pass if we don't even get this ballot initiative on the November ballot. So just wanted to begin the conversation with that. But by the way, we are over halfway there. And so we are slowly but surely collecting these signatures with about 30 days to go. But as you can see on the previous slide, that this ballot initiative was put together not by politicians, but by nonprofit housing experts, homelessness experts, and that's really important distinction to make. And so what will this ballot initiative achieve? What it's going to achieve is providing assistance for folks that are experiencing homelessness, that are at risk of experiencing homelessness, and it will give them access to permanent housing, rental assistance, income assistance for low-income seniors. You can see here that it's going to build housing, 26,000 homes over the next 10 years. That will help 69,000 people. It will help renters, 475,000 at-risk renters maintain stability and keep their housing. That's very important. We want to make sure that there's strong oversight. And so we've gotten some feedback from folks talking about similar ballot initiatives passing and wanting to make sure that the money goes where it says it's going to go. So this is actually one of the strongest citizen oversight protections that have been proposed in the city of Los Angeles. And finally, we're going to be able to create over 40,000 jobs, construction jobs over the next 10 years. And so on the next slide, we will see that we are really talking about the lowest average median income families. Less than 15% of AMI is focusing there, and then also less than 30% of AMI. So we're really focusing on low-income renter support and comprehensive financing and policy tactics to keep folks in their homes. And so on the next slide, we're going to see kind of the equitable funding, and most importantly, we're going to be able to generate over $800 million. Right now, we're estimating about $875 million annually, and this will be levied, a tax will be levied on property transfers. And those property rates, as you can see, it's very small text there, but it is 4.5% on property transfers, 4.5% for $5 to $10 million value. And if it's over $10 million, that tax is 5.5%. So that is not that much, but it will actually generate over $800 million annually. And also important to note that over 97% of the properties in the city of Los Angeles will not be impacted by this fee. And so that is really, so we already talked about the robust oversight, making sure that the Citizens Oversight Committee will have specific expectations on it. But I recognize we're really short on time, so wanted to provide at least a couple of minutes for questions if there were any to be had. But the next couple of slides are really talking about the funding, where that 70% will go for affordable housing and the 30% on the prevention programs. But those are almost secondary right now, because the primary focus right now is getting this on the ballot, and that's going to require all of your signatures, all of your friends, all of your family, anyone that you know, getting this to qualify for the ballot. But you can see that this has been written by community leaders, including ACT LA, SCAMP, Lane, Unite Here, Local 11, and many other partners, including Venice Community Housing, Kiwa, and others. So this is a great ballot initiative. We're going to need all of your help to get this qualified. And in a couple of slides, you can see kind of the timeline that I have that we've outlined. And so we filed this measure at the end of 2021. We got the ballot title secured, and right now we're in this signature gathering phase that I just discussed, and we're going to submit those signatures by the 27th of April, and then we'll be waging the campaign once we get this ballot qualified. And you can see that quite a bit of folks support this ballot initiative based on our polling, and the really good news is this is only requiring a simple majority. So we do not need that higher threshold that other ballot initiatives in the past have required. So we only need 50+1. We do believe with your support we can get there. Thank you.
Hi, Chris. This is Lisa from the Trust. I was wondering if you could drop a link in the chat where people could go for more information. And then also, how could one provide a signature to you?
That's a great question, and yes, I will drop a link in the chat. The website is United to House LA, and so you can get quite a bit of information there, and that's what I will drop in the chat. And how you can sign. So we are going to a lot of our member properties and speaking with other folks who would be willing to take a packet. And so if you are interested in having a packet delivered to you, I can drop my email in the chat as well. And what we're doing is we're frankly delivering these packets across the city.
Thank you, Chris, for that. It looks like we are quickly approaching 1 o'clock, so we will not have time for Q&A for our guests, but we do want to take this time to thank you all for joining us here today, especially Chris and our panel earlier. Thank you to Sierra, Jet, and Nadia as well for joining in the conversation. And if you have any questions for Chris, please feel free to reach out to him. Let's see. Oh, there's a question. Can I get access to the recorded meeting? If you subscribe to Skid Row Housing Trust's newsletter, we will send you a link to the recording on Monday, and then you can also visit our YouTube page. It will be updated there as well. So thank you, everyone. I hope that you have a really great afternoon.